Okay, we're going to get going. So thank you for joining today's webinar. Today's webinar is brought to you by IREX. The webinar is a very important webinar today. It is the fight against human trafficking. We've got an expert panel lined up. We're including Opal Singleton. She is the president and CEO of Mignon Kids. She's trained over 500,000 officials in government, school districts, and others in terms of trafficking. Also, we've got Jaime Ochoa, who has got decades of experience in anti-human trafficking, working alongside schools and local government. We've got Mignon Jambon, who is a founding member, who is a licensed professional counselor-based certified supervisor for the last 20 years, working alongside human trafficking victims. And finally, we've got Manolo Guillen, who is a founding member of the International Network of Hearts with over 20 years experience in helping hundreds of children in anti-human trafficking. So right now, I'd like to go to each and every one of our expert panelists for them to give an intro on themselves and where they see human trafficking in the United States today. So to begin with, I'd like to start with President and CEO of Mignon Kids, Opal Singleton. So Opal, if you can unmute yourself.
That helps, doesn't it? Well, welcome everybody. I see your names and I recognize several of you, so I'm glad you're on today. Been in combating human trafficking since 2008, started in Cambodia, have worked with the Riverside County Sheriff Department since 2010. Have a couple of books, a radio show. You'll hear about a movie coming out to combat sextortion. Lots of things are changing in California on human trafficking. We have SB 357 called the California Safer Streets Act. It will, in essence, legalize street prostitution starting January 1st. I have been following the changes. I've known from my research and have followed money laundering and organized crime, trafficking here in California. I do train across the nation and recognize some of you across the nation here, but I am concerned. In the last 3 or 4 years, we've seen a lot more organized crime coming in with massive amounts of trafficking. It's all about money laundering back to China or South America. We're seeing gangs operating human trafficking rings here that are operated from prisons. We have the pimps and the general where they bring in a young person. We've seen a massive increase in sextortion. Literally NCMEC took 29.3 million cases last year where kids were being blackmailed with photos. That's 80,000 a day. And so you're seeing all of this come together, and a lot of it has to do with technology and legislation and the fact that many groups are organized, and it becomes about using human beings for money laundering. So most likely that's what I'll talk about. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Opal. And our next guest that I'd like to introduce himself is Jaime.
So I don't know why you made it rough for me, Daniel, following Opal. She should have been last. My name's Jaime Ochoa. I've been in education for the last 30 years. I know you mentioned a little bit about the sex trafficking experience, but basically my sex trafficking and human trafficking education has actually come from learning from Miss Opal and her trainings. And I've had the honor to be at her premiere at her movie that you all need to see. And she'll give a link at the end of this webinar to it. And I strongly suggest everyone to see it. But I'm going to be speaking from what I see going on in the schools in general and working with different schools, but also from the lens of technology, also how we can combat, fire with fire, basically talk about the possibilities of assisting our youth and our communities and our world by using the right technology to combat this.
Thank you, Jaime. And third up, I'd like to introduce Mignon Jambon.
Hi, everybody. I'm glad that you're here today. I am a licensed professional counselor, a board certified supervisor, also a PhD candidate at this time, and have been working with this population counseling for almost 20 years. And so I've really enjoyed seeing the awareness that's happened over that 20-year period. And I think in general, in regards to human trafficking and things that I'm seeing in general, unfortunately, our traffickers are getting really creative and resourceful. And some really great examples of this are, unfortunately, our supply line of human bodies, right? Especially children that are being imported and exported across our borders. Again, I think Opal mentioned it, they're using technology to increase their profitability, stop their losses. Their logistics are always on top and seem to be better than ours. And they coordinate, unfortunately, better on the dark web, on social media, on websites even. And, with all of this together, they are able to course correct, unfortunately, almost faster than we can educate. So looking forward to this, and I'll send it right back to Daniel.
Thank you, Mignon. And then last but not least is Manolo Guillen.
Thank you, Daniel, and welcome everyone. For me, it's really a privilege to be here with all of you. Again, my name is Manolo Guillen. I am actually wearing two hats today. One is as Vice President of the International Network of Hearts, and that is a nonprofit that I had the pleasure of co-founding more than 13 years now. I have been involved in the fight against human trafficking for about 25 years or more. And I remember a while ago, oh, and by the way, through our foundation, this is something that really, I guess, gives me a lot of pleasure to say, that we've had the privilege of creating 3 different safe homes, shelters in Mexico, one for women, young women, and one for children, young girls, and then one for women or young girls who are transitioning into womanhood and are already, one of our kids has gone to college already, received a beca. We partnered with different universities for that. Then we also recently founded a safe home or group home for young boys, which again, I'm very happy for that. I've also had the privilege of founding programs in San Diego and got the privilege to train a lot of people in the community, including law enforcement and many other first responders. One of the things that I've seen is, first of all, I'm really happy that the language is changing. Back then, when I got involved in this fight, we didn't even know what the term human trafficking was. It was entirely new for us. We called it exploitation or CSEC, for example. But a lot of things have changed. A lot of things have remained the same. I'll mention one. For example, there was a lot of street prostitution, street exploitation when I first got involved. Some of that changed because of the task forces, a lot of the interventions that these task forces made, a lot of sting operations. We were involved in many of them, but we got to see a lot of the pimps and the gangs spread. We disrupted a lot of their activity. A lot of it went online. The interesting thing, though, even though a lot of the exploitation has gone online, a lot of it still remains physical activity, meaning that even according to research and our experience worldwide, and certainly here in the US, that a lot of this exploitation still happens, and the number one place that it happens is in hotels and or motels. That is with regard to commercial sexual exploitation. So I'm very excited to talk about technology, how we can use technology to curb this, to really begin to win the battle against human trafficking. So I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Thank you, Manolo. So to kick things off, Mignon, you've been, I've often heard you say that human trafficking is kind of the crime of crimes. Would you like to elaborate on that a little bit?
Sure. It is a crime of crimes. There are multiple steps along the way before you actually get to the human trafficking piece. And so there's lots of laws being broken before we get there. And it's unfortunate. And I love that we are able to come in after the fact in recovery, in counseling and those type of things. But in general, I feel like we need to be moving and being more preemptive. You don't wait till you're dying to see a doctor. We go when we have some symptomology present. And there's a lot of symptomology that we have that I think if we can maybe kind of gear and shift a little bit and focus there, so that, you know, ultimately we can stop the supply and demand of people, which is exactly what it is. And if there's a demand for it, it starts with that. If we can stop the product, right, which is people, you know, we've cut it at its core. And I think that that's something that's really, really important that we need to do with this.
It's a great point, and I think in terms of what you said, it brings up a little bit of what you said in your opening statement, Opal, in terms of that new California law. I know it's something that you're extremely passionate about as well. Would you like to be able to educate the audience a little bit on what that new California law looks like and your opinion on it?
Which law are you talking about?
No, I brought that up for Opal.
Oh, okay.
Okay, first of all, in a disclaimer, I'm very opinionated on this because I fought long and hard against it and ended up losing. We're talking about SB 357. It's actually called the California Safer Streets Act. And I get the basis for the law, but I disagree with the solution that they have provided. The basis for the law are that many of the people that are doing street commercial sex are women of color. Or they're trans or they're gay or like that. And the basis of the law says that law enforcement then targets them. They end up getting arrested and they have a record. I don't disagree with some of that. However, what they're saying is they've completely rewritten the California Penal Code for solicitation for the purposes of prostitution and loitering for the solicitation for the purposes of prostitution. It doesn't say if you're buying or selling, and it says that law enforcement can no longer intervene. People like myself see that as an absolute disaster, because if law enforcement cannot intervene, we can no longer access someone to help them get out of the life. On top of it, I believe it will give a license to all kinds of Chinese, Taiwanese, Thailand, Honduran, Guatemalan cartels to bring their people in on a massive basis and use it for money laundering. And that's my prediction. Already we had 5 different rings here that were literally laundering tens of millions of dollars back to China. They're all ran by women, by the way, in this case. And in this case, one of them had 20,000 sex ads. So that's a whole lot of sex. These women are brought in legally. They can't get out because they're owned by the cartel. They have sex 10, 15, 20 times a day. They never get a dime. In fact, they owe the person that's controlling them. The same kind of thing is happening with some of our unaccompanied minors. Right here in our county, we had one 14-year-old girls recruited by grandma in Mexico, put out for prostitution all throughout Southern California, money going back to the Mexican cartel. I'm very concerned about the homeless population. They're out there anyway. You want to make 20 bucks, okay? This is what you do. And how does anyone intervene? The biggest concern I have with that law is it has no limitations. It's not like something out of Nevada where it's in a brothel, it's managed, you have health checks, that kind of thing. There are no limitations. You can loiter for the purpose of soliciting prostitution, buying or selling, in front of schools, in front of businesses, in front of your home, in front of churches. It will be everywhere and our children will see it. So I am very concerned that this is really going to go the wrong direction. And that's one reason I'm here with you today, because the answer to this is going to be technology, recognizing that sex offender that's out there. I was just thinking as we were talking about these ones that have these massive sex rings, the Asian sex rings and the Chinese in this particular case, you know, they put ads all over the state of California for one girl. And so we could use that's online to compare it to see how many places they're organized. So your technology, I think, is going to become critical in California to combat this kind of situation.
Yeah, you bring up so many good points, Opal. Just touching on that aspect of the technology side, I want to pull in Manolo, because your experience working alongside Amber Alerts, building organizations, cross-country organizations. How have you seen the technology evolve? How have you seen it aid and assist in the recovery of victims? And where are we today?
Very good question. Over the years, my organization has had the privilege of working with Amber Alert with the U.S. Department of Justice. And one of the things that we've done is we've hosted a binational conference on human trafficking, and they provide a training on the Amber Alert because, as many of you know, a lot of the missing children, missing and runaway children, are often, that's very connected to children who are being trafficked. So we got to work really closely with our neighbors in Mexico and Baja California, and we supported them in installing an Amber Alert system there. It's not as sophisticated as the one in the US, but I think it's a good start for them. What the Amber Alert is missing, and this is very important, is a connection to artificial intelligence. Now imagine if the Amber Alert, as good and as effective as it is, were to be coupled with artificial intelligence, where, I mean, especially at city to city, if different cities in the county, in one county, for example, are working together with the private sector, if we were to bring in the Walmarts and the Costcos in the US, if we were to bring in the AMPMs, the 7-Elevens, if we were to work with more liquor stores, with hotels, as I mentioned earlier, when a child would go missing and that'd be an Amber Alert, the system is effective as it is already, but I think it could be perfected even more. So I would totally advocate, and I have, and that's something we have a meeting coming up really soon to meet with the leaders of the Amber Alert program here in the United States to present this new, well, not entirely new, but new to them at least, technology so that we can, I think, really, I mean, if you know about missing children when a child goes missing, I mean, minutes and seconds really, really determine the life of that child. So again, I can't even begin to explain how revolutionary this new technology could mean for the Amber Alert and for rescuing children.
Great points. And at this point, I'd like to circle in Jaime, because when you talk about missing children, I'd like Jaime to just touch on is how real and how prevalent is human trafficking among school children, because there's been 22 victims that have been recovered in San Diego alone this year, with the average age dropping from 16 to 14 years old. So Jaime, with your experience working in school districts around the United States, what's some knowledge that you can pass to the audience?
So I'll give a little background of myself as far as working with different people, different agencies, and so forth. Manolo and myself, we speak on a weekly basis a lot. I learn a lot from him and what he's doing and his background in law enforcement, and also what he does on the private, nonprofit section. I learned so much from Miss Opal, from all her trainings throughout the years, and I take all of it. And working for 30 years in the school district, I started in security. I went to attendance investigations and child welfare investigations. I belong to a board where we see student attendance review boards, and many times you hear different stories, and it kind of gives you red flags as you listen to the conversations from the parents, from the students. I was also in discipline as a dean of discipline at a high school. And then lately, these last 10 years, I'm an intervention prevention specialist. So I'm able to have a wide lens and see all the different concerns and all the different factors that contribute possibly to this type of behavior or as a victim. I see in our schools the biggest threat is the lack of attention that we have with our homeless. Ms. Opal mentioned that the homeless population, the McKinney-Vento kids, the ones that are struggling through hardships economically, you know, with their families or in group homes or foster care, they're in danger. The LGBTQ community, also families that we have knowledge of history of abuse and so forth. So these kids come here looking for a safe shelter, but many times, and I remember the first time I heard the bottom girl from Miss Opal back in the day years ago, that opened up my eyes. Now I was looking for this type of behavior. So the education from experts like you see here, I'm the bottom of the fruit here. So, but the education that you can take not just to your schools, but to your baseball teams, to your soccer teams, to your churches, to everywhere, it will change the way you look at the world. And you will see these red flags once you've kind of learned what the factors are and what to look out for. But what I see right now is a huge increase of this problem in California. Like she mentioned, these laws are not going to help that are going to be taking place here. But I'm concerned, to be honest with you. This is a worldwide concern. We're talking about our little communities and our schools. It's much bigger than that. I'm just saying from the lens of somebody in a school, as somebody that works with these kids every day, it's a huge problem because they're targeting our youth. They're becoming younger and younger and younger. And it's sad. I mean, at one point I heard the most desired was a 9-year-old child, boy, and then it moved to an 11-year. It changes constantly, but what's not changing, it's targeting our preteens, and it's we just really need to pay attention. And you said it best. I mean, sometimes we're trying to educate ourselves, but they're already 2 steps ahead. So by the time we catch up, they've already figured out that we're already trying to catch up. So we really need to come together and figure out some solutions here with everyone here that's, and I know I see a gentleman here that I work with also, is Brian Perry is on here. And there's a lot that I've learned from him and what he's done working with the prisons. So we can all learn from each other. To answer your question, Dan, it's alarming, and I really can't point a finger on it because, like I said, they're a couple steps ahead of us. So it's all about awareness at this point.
So yeah, I'd like Mignon and then Opal to jump in here. What I'm putting out there a little bit is obviously when an individual child goes missing for, let's say, the first 72 hours are crucial. In your experience, Mignon, is there anybody even looking for these children? Like what's, because obviously, you know, that law enforcement's resources are utilized for 72 hours, but then after that, what's being done? And then often you need to have that family, that family surrounding from the child or the individual, which is pushing law enforcement to keep searching. But from your experience, how do you find that?
And I'm in Texas, just so everybody knows that, because I know we've got a lot of people here in California. So speaking from a Texas perspective, there are a lot of organizations out there right now. Here locally, we have Traffic 911, and they actually have a grant where they are there at the hospitals, at the police stations within 24 hours, or actually scratch that. I think they're there within an hour of being informed of someone being picked up, because they want to make sure that they can intervene quickly. There's a company called For the One, and they try to stay a little quiet because they're the ones that are out there trying to find them. They don't want anyone to know. They're nonprofit, but they don't want people to really know about them because they don't want the traffickers to know that that's what they're doing, right? Even here in Dallas, the NFL has it's called Sports World Against Trafficking, that they have, that the NFL is looking at ways that they can intervene at different, arenas and things like that. So there is a lot of help out there. Yes, you are correct that unfortunately it's the parents and other people that have to kind of push this because of the nature of this crime and because of the nature of trafficking and the trauma that's involved. So it can be very difficult to circumvent. It can be very difficult to get a hold of some of these children or adults or whoever they are. So there's been this piece too as well, because our family systems look so different nowadays. It's not necessarily parents and a child. It could be an uncle. It could be a grandparent, right? Things look so different nowadays that I find that sometimes people don't know what to do. So, I think people have mentioned before, education and bringing awareness to these companies and these people that are out there that are really trying to make a difference and intervening.
And then I'd just like Opal, if you can just follow on from that a little bit as well.
Okay, the missing kid thing is just a tragedy. And we have dealt with that for many years. I remember back in 2012, I sat with a family whose daughter was missing for 9 months before it was over. They didn't know if she was in Las Vegas, Tijuana, Los Angeles. They spent every breathing minute trying to find her. In the end, she was being trafficked over in LA off Long Beach Boulevard. So we formed Mignon Kids Missing Kids. Now we're a fairly small organization, but we encourage people to, we go out, because I work with the sheriff, I go out to all the law enforcement in Riverside County and give them cards to give to a parent. For me, it's about empowering a parent. When that parent fills out that form that their kid is missing and they go home and they wait 24 hours, that is hell. Okay. And so my goal was, if we can get them to build information and get it out there, that we can send it out. And it has to have a police report. I don't take the leads. I don't want to get involved in a custody dispute, but that's what we do. And we send it out to tens of thousands. We've sent out millions and millions. Now I know it goes to NECMEC and comes back out, but time passes, and that time for a parent is absolutely deadly. I would like to see the runaway and missing children systems completely change for law enforcement all across the US. In this day and age, it's crazy to have somebody type in that stuff. If they can get a code, they can upload photos, they can immediately send in a bunch of their Instagrams and their social media. I say that because 58% of kids who are being sextorted, not necessarily in trafficking, but being blackmailed, will go out and meet up with their predator to negotiate back the return of that photo. And many of them get raped. So we need a way to automate that system, that for a parent to be able to upload. I train faith-based organizations to get your youth groups to train your parents on how to look through an Instagram account. I mean, we're working from the bottom up there. And finally, I partner with our social services for Riverside County. As social services across America after COVID have a massive number of missing and unlocated kids. Now, they may not be missing, they may be right there, but nobody knows that because there's so many and they've lost touch. So if you follow Mignon Kids, I hope you do at mignonkids.org, you will see that we're sending out these missing kid flyers about every other day. And we're supporting our social services to find those kids.
Yeah, and if you are watching the recording of this, all the mignonkids.org information will be found in the description below. And so just touching on what you said, Opal, and I want to circle in Manolo here, is that this is, obviously we're talking about Texas, we brought up California, but this is a nationwide, if not global, epidemic going on right now. And Manolo, obviously, you've been involved with Amber Alert and other national organizations. What do you see that there is disjoint between the states? Do you think that this needs to be on a national level? There needs to be some sort of governing body that can operate nationally in a coinciding with maybe law enforcement, the bureaus, and so forth. How do you see this playing out?
Well, things have progressed a whole lot, to be honest with you. Before, there was a lot of miscommunication, no communication at all. Even in local jurisdictions, they weren't working together. They weren't communicating or sharing information. A lot of things have changed that have improved that. A lot more needs to be done. There are national organizations, there's certainly statewide organizations and I was part of the governor's task force, for example, at one point where we were brought in, from different cities, different jurisdictions to address human trafficking at a state level here in California. And that was through the Attorney General's office. So a lot of states have begun to take steps like those to communicate and introduce, at least we get to know each other. I think what needs to happen, if it doesn't already exist, is either a coalition or more representatives from high tech, the high tech industry, especially those who are experienced in artificial intelligence, AI, because what is behind are the laws and the political will, I think, in a lot of states and certainly across the country. There's been a lot of progress, but I think we still have a lot of work to do. What is actually, good, if there's something positive out of this, is that we have the technology. We have the technology to change things. I had mentioned earlier, we have the technology now to work with different cities and the private sector so that everywhere where there's a camera and a child that is missing, that is registered to this platform, is immediately in real time identified with video, text, and the time, the date. If that child was with a person or in a vehicle, that immediately gets registered. That's something that we didn't have before. That's what I meant about combining this with the Amber Alert. We have the technology, and certainly inside of IREX, that's something that could be developed, and I believe it's in the works, of peeling the layers of anonymity that predators use when they go inside the dark web to prey on innocent children. We have the technology. What doesn't exist exactly yet are all of the laws and certainly the political will. So perhaps a discussion around a coalition, I don't know if nationwide, but maybe locally, that would really bring in that missing link. The missing link for me and all of us who have fought against human trafficking for years, I can tell you the missing link right now is technology. And the good news is that it actually does exist. We're just not using it.
No, that's great. A great point, Manolo. And Opal, I'd like to circle you in here because I know you're not scared. I know you're not scared of sharing your opinions. So in terms of why, if the technology is there and all your experience training over 500,000 public servants, why is this not fully deployed yet? Why is this actually not at a national level yet?
I have to watch what I say here, but there has to be a will at the top of legislation to make this happen. For instance, I'm part of a coalition that has tried and beat our heads against the wall for almost 2 years now, just to get child sex crimes classified as a violent and serious crime in the state of California. It is not. We have Proposition 20 that would have made it that way. Even Proposition 57 is geared so that up to 20,000 sex offenders may get out early. I'm not saying they all will, but they're eligible to get out early based on the laws that they put in. SB 1042, I put a lot of money towards that and worked with a lot of legislation, set in on it. They even threw my name out on the floor there in Sacramento, but it was absolutely pigeonholed. That would have made human trafficking a violent and serious crime in the state of California. Now, those are not emotional terms. Those are legal terms. Unless a crime is there are only 13 violent crimes in the state of California, violent and serious. Unless a crime is classified as violent and serious, then you don't get into the 3 strikes law. And so that allows those sex offenders to get out early. And in fact, even in California, there's a movement not even to enforce previous of those additional enhanced sentences. So there just isn't the will at the top of the state to do that. I've set in on all of them, and they get pigeonholed right in the Public Safety Committee, and they don't get advanced forward. And there's a whole group of people, the DA out of Kern County, several legislators have fought and fought and fought for it, but they are not violent and serious crimes in the state of California. And outside of that, it limits what can happen. So, from our point of view, you can fight that we spend a lot of time trying to change legislation. But with the parties that are in play, you're not going to do that. The next thing then is to go into prevention and intervention, which is what I do every day of my life. So, but your technology, the longer we talk, the more I see things, and we'll talk later of ways that you can tie technology, not only just with street kind of activity, but much of your sex trafficking takes place online in sex ads, multiple sex ads. And I believe you're going to see webcam sex, interactive pornography be the new sex trafficking. Why is a pimp going to take a girl to a motel for $150 and risk a STD and a reverse sting, and he doesn't pay, when in fact he can have 2,000 people paying to watch a video of her and put her off into a stall where she's talking to new people every 10 minutes and billing out at $20 or $30, often in cryptocurrency, so it's hard to maintain. You're going to see a crossover of online webcam sex in a massive way. We already are. I think it was Live Jasmine had 70 million paid subscribers. And that's something like $140 million. That is organized kind of money laundering kind of thing. You're going to see that. And so your technology, I'm starting to see where it isn't just the street. We need to tie it to the sex ads. We need to tie it to the webcam sex. We need to tie it to the street because she's out there and nobody can intervene. And it isn't just she's now, by the way. You're seeing a huge increase now in the male population doing that. And so I can see, I think it was Jaime that said this, your technology really can be that catalyst that could bring it together so that the law enforcement can hone in on the offender and who's most at risk.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, powerful words, Opal. Just before we jump into some of the questions from the audience, I'd like to just bring up the point where you're looking at the adoption of the technology, because if you get two cities with city A and city B, more often than not, and Mignon, I'd like to bring you in on this, that you'll probably remember years ago, there was a high profile case of a missing child, Madeleine McCann, from the United Kingdom. Her family, she was from a middle class background, they was able to afford lots of marketing, they got in touch with the mainstream media. But more often than not, I think that technology is a leveler. It doesn't matter anything about your background, it doesn't matter about anything about your demographics, the AI will work for each of them equally. And so I think, Mignon, I'd just like to touch on a little bit about the backgrounds of some of the victims that you've worked with in the past, because I think that's important, because more often than not, we talk about the first 72 hours of law enforcement. We talk about you need to have a good family surrounding, pushing them, maybe be able to have their own resources. But what for the families what don't? And so I think that this can be a great leveler in a lot of ways. So Mignon, if you'd like to just talk a little bit about working with victims throughout these decades.
Sure, and I agree with the technology, and because I think there are a lot of misconceptions out there. Yes, we have research. Okay, so we do have research that shows we know that kids in the foster care system, we know kids that a certain demographic, right, that might be involved in this. But I think we forget that it's anyone is game. Unfortunately, as demand goes, right, we need that product. I have counseled women, men, children who come from what you would think is a quote unquote wonderful background. Parents are doctors or lawyers, and how could this happen? We live in a wonderful home, but it still happens. I've had clients before that lived in different states, and because of our technology with the Tinder apps and things like that, met somebody and went to a different state to go to a party, let's say, for example, and didn't know and were sold and left at this party and were left there, right? So there's so many, as I said earlier, our traffickers are getting very creative. And they will find different ways and they will use technology. So what I love is let's use technology against them. There are ways that we can do, and we can flip that script, so to speak. And I think traffickers, they course correct so quickly as the information gets out, and we need to be correcting our courses just as quickly. So I look at it as like a company who's, oh, we're going to wait until we get bigger to hire people. No, we need to go in expecting that our company is going to be bigger, so we need to hire more people now. And I think if we have that kind of perspective where, no, let's do this now, let's think of steps 5, 6, and 7, even though we may be only on 1, right? We want that technology like, hey, if they do this, what would come next? What would come next? What would come next? And circumvent that. Again, being preemptive and education. And that's the bottom line with a lot of these clients that I talk with. It was very sneaky. It wasn't always very obvious what this trafficker was doing until it was too late, or until that they were extorted, for example, like Opal's talked about. And then they didn't feel like they had anything that they could do to fight back with. So all of these things I think are just super important. So I love to hear about I'm loving hearing about this technology. And I think if we change our perspective as let us use it against them, I think that's also going to be really positive.
Yeah, perfect. And we've got some questions from the audience I'd like to move to now before your closing statements each. And yeah, fighting against these, I know that the Anti-Human Trafficking Intelligence Initiative provides a database of non-compliant sex offenders and so forth. So there is plenty of organizations out there doing great things. So I'm just going to throw this question out. Our expert panel, just give me a hands up if you want to take this one. So in Hawaii, they label most children that go missing as runaways and not missing, where in other states, if a child goes missing, they are labeled missing. Could Hawaii stigma be mislabeling children that go missing, be adding to the trafficking issue in Hawaii? Give me a hands up who wants to take this one. Manolo.
Yes, that's a very good question. I believe that for many people, certainly in many law enforcement agencies, the term runaway has a negative connotation, meaning that a lot of people believe that children are runaways or are running away because they're bad children or because they're rebels. And in my experience, and I have worked with hundreds and actually thousands of runaway and missing children over the years, and what I have seen over and over, a common theme is that children are running away from something. So I believe that if they're running away, I believe that, like, for example, the National Center for Missing Exploited Children, oftentimes, and a lot of, I've seen law enforcement agencies have different classifications. I think that when a child goes missing, I think that's the term that ought to be given, a missing child. And sometimes missing and endangered gives it a different classification, I think, which sometimes is good. But I do believe that we should be careful how we use the term runaway, because it often has a negative connotation. And if a child runs away, oftentimes they're running away from something. And if a child is not home, to me, that child is missing.
Great answer, Manolo. Jaime, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to piggyback a little bit on Manolo's explanation there as a runaway. In schools as well, I mean, that's a red flag for us. Like he said, they're running away for a reason, and a lot of times we think, they're just bad kids. They're running away. They don't want to come to school. They don't like listening to, their parents' rules and regulations and so forth. That's the first thing that comes to mind. But in the schools, we really need to look at those kids and really dig deep to find out what the true story is. It's just like in the classroom, you have children that are, not behaving. They're acting out. They're just causing ruckus in the classroom, right? They're crying out for help. These are the different flags, red flags that we should be paying attention to. And just like a runaway out in the streets, we have these similar behaviors in the classrooms on campus. And just from the lens from somebody working in the schools, it's very similar. I mean, when we're talking about schools, we're talking about a little pocket, but it's basically very similar to the, to the street behavior. And, I'm just gonna agree exactly what he said. Sometimes we think, oh, they're just bad kids. They don't want to listen. They're not behaving. And we kind of just almost shove them to the side and not really pay full attention to maybe something that's really serious going on. So I just wanted to kind of, from a school perspective, you're correct, Manolo. So
yeah, and then Jaime, whilst you're there talking from a school's perspective, we got one of the questions in saying, what can schools do to stop these bad people? I know I just touched on, obviously, you can get databases of non-compliant sex offenders. So if they ever appear on premise or near premise, it can trigger an alert. But from an expert such as yourself, what can schools do in addition to that?
I think work better and more close with the law enforcement agencies that, with the SROs that are on campus. There needs to be better communication between the schools and law enforcement. So once again, that's where technology, I believe, will be a big factor of helping this type of seriousness that we have going on. It's the lack of communication, I believe.
Opal?
There too, and kind of go along with this other question about law enforcement. First of all, I believe that we have to educate the entire public about the value of law enforcement. And I have a radio show every Saturday afternoon at 3:00 on AM 590, The Answer. Anyway, but I have law enforcement on regularly. And the reason I have that is the value of law enforcement in protecting your child. And so I think we need to step back and let the public realize the value that they're presenting. Having said that, one of the reasons we made the movie Sextortion, The Hidden Pandemic, and it's been a long time coming out, but the idea here is that most kids, 58% of kids, according to a research study out of Ohio, 58% of kids that are being blackmailed will go out to meet their pedophile to negotiate back that photograph, and they will get violated. And so where I start from, I have trained tens of thousands of kids. And what I know is kids don't want to be violated and they want to be leaders, but they don't understand where their naked photo goes when they hit send. And that's the purpose of the movie is, what is a child pornography ring? What is the dark web? What is bulletproof hosting? Where does your photo go? How it goes out to 1 million people, just like that. And you will be contacted. And if you meet up with that person, you will get violated. Now, you have the ability to report that and help other people. And so I have found that once a kid understands where photos go and why people want them, then they start to take a proactive position. And I think we have to back that way up in our schools and explain to them how the internet's made and how all this happens. Once they have a photo out there, they are much more likely to end up being either raped or trafficked. And so if we can get there first and take the thou shalt not out of it, but empower them to be leaders to train the next generation. Many of these kids will say, I'm scared to death for my 10-year-old sister. Mom lets her do stuff I'd never get to do, and she's going to get hurt. Make them leaders, but educate them and empower them. And finally, I'd like to say with our law enforcement, and I'm very, very fortunate because we doubled the size of our human trafficking task force when everybody else was pulling it out. We now have 14 full-time people in Riverside County just for human trafficking. But when they're not investigating cases, they go out to the group homes. They go out to a lot of your foster agencies. They go out to a lot of your high-risk schools, and they have dinner with a cop or they play soccer with them. They don't wear uniforms. They start to talk. They build that rapport, and that has made a huge difference.
Yeah, and you talk about the digital transformation, as Manolo pointed out, how that has evolved as well. And Mignon, I was going to come to you because how has that evolved the victim as well in terms of the actions taking place, in terms of in terms of their whole ordeal. It's kind of when we're talking about pictures, we're talking about technology. So how has that affected the mindset of the victims?
Well, it's trauma, plain and simple. And trauma is really a diagnosis that's so difficult to work with a lot of times because there's varying degrees of trauma, and it's also about perspective. And remember, everyone has a different perspective of everything, depending on that person and where they're coming from and what's their situation and their family system. And there's so many factors that are involved in. But in terms of the victim, there's lots of healing. There's lots of counseling that has to be done in order to heal a lot of what happens. And to kind of piggyback off of what everyone was talking about, and I think it was Lisa's question, we need to work cohesively together. We need a multidisciplinary team, right? We can't expect our police officers to do everything. That's not possible. We need counselors involved in this, and working with school counselors, and working with the teachers, and working with whatever teams and resources that are outside. And I think if people start working cohesively together, that training can happen, that understanding can happen, and it's not just left on one person to try and fix. Because I think that's an issue that is difficult in general. We can't, we need to work together to make this work.
Absolutely. So unfortunately, we're running out of time now, and I'd like to just get a closing statement from each of our expert speakers. And just to let the audience know, this is the start of a constant webinar in terms of how we're going to be attacking human trafficking. You may see some familiar faces again, but we want to have this as a recurring event throughout the rest of the year and into 2023 as well. So in terms of closing statements, I'm going to go reverse this way. So I'll start with you first, Manolo. I'd just like to know kind of like where human trafficking is today, what you'd like to see for the remaining 2022, 2023, and what you envisage.
Well, unfortunately, human trafficking has doubled, has gotten worse because of the pandemic. There's a lot of kids who were out of school, at home, online, unfortunately unsupervised, and that allowed for a lot of predators to go online and recruit them, and other forms of recruitment too. A lot of things have changed for the better. I think, as I mentioned before, that the missing link, certainly in a lot of jurisdictions, I'm speaking for San Diego, we are meeting and working closer with law enforcement and introducing them to new technology that could help revolutionize this whole fight against human trafficking. I had mentioned before that one of the #1 places worldwide and in the US where children get exploited are still in hotels and motels. And I actually believe, and I used to say this before, that street prostitution is eventually going to walk over online, and there's going to be a lot of webcam exploitation. And there is a lot of that, and that will continue. I find it very difficult to believe that it will not continue to be a physical activity where it happens at a physical location, especially in hotels and motels, which is, this is why I am really suggesting that technology be used, artificial intelligence, and the cameras that are already available, where people have no expectation of privacy and the infrastructure is already set, it's already there. That imagine if children go missing. And again, I emphasize the huge correlation between missing children and child sex trafficking. If children go missing and we become partners with these large and smaller hotels where their cameras capture a pimp, imagine if there's databases where there's wanted lists of human traffickers, just like these wanted lists exist for terrorists and cartel leaders, traffickers. So imagine if we had more of that in the fight against human trafficking and using this type of technology. Imagine again, if instead of counting on human beings who continually, there's human error, we get tired, we get distracted, all kinds of things happen. It's impossible to monitor 100 screens on a wall. There's bound to be human error. Imagine a platform, artificial intelligence technology, that never gets tired, never skips a beat. Whenever there's a missing child, law enforcement departments only have limited time and resources to try to look for that child, if even that. But this platform will never stop. If that child appears in any camera that's registered, the cameras will pick it up in real time. The same thing with a platform for the dark web. Imagine predators going online. Imagine federal agents trying to look for them, but they get tired. They might commit errors. But imagine a platform, artificial intelligence technology, that never gets tired, never skips a beat, and constantly begins to peel away the layers of anonymity that these predators, child predators, believe that they enjoy. So again, I would like for us to continue to talk about this conversation about technology and how it could really revolutionize this fight against human trafficking.
Brilliant, Manolo. Yeah, absolutely brilliant. And then to you, Mignon, kind of the same question. You might want to sprinkle in a little bit of NFL, seeing as you're in the Dallas Cowboys boardroom right now.
Yeah, yes, no, I definitely think I think just being preemptive and awareness and education, those are things that just need to they just need to continue at this point. And I think this awareness and education it's expanding, just like the NFL and their the sports against trafficking, sports world against trafficking. And I think because we know it happens not just on the web, it happens in venues, in arenas. We just had one that happened a few months ago where a girl was with her dad at a game and somehow she went to the bathroom and never made it back. And luckily was found very quickly. Well, I say very quickly, it was 2 weeks, but found her again on the web and they were able to find her and recover her. But I think education is going to be a big piece of this. And especially with our children, and as you know, we need to start it a little early, what we're talking about, and we need to, make sure that they are aware of what's going on. And I love the technology and being able to, catch the stuff preemptively. Like I said, let's use it against them at this point in time, because I agree that technology is, while it's been really wonderful, it has not been really wonderful when it comes to trafficking.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's the whole motto, AI for good. And speaking of education and children, you're up, Jaime.
Well, like everyone's mentioned here, the problem has doubled, tripling. It's going to keep on growing. It's an epidemic, in my opinion. Education awareness is huge. I would love to see a class, some curriculum that would be mandatory in the high schools, in the junior highs, that the students need to take. You're going to teach them there. And I see that as probably the best thing that we could do to educate our kids is make it mandatory as an elective, that everyone has to take. And I think it will open up conversations with some of these kids that are hiding their fears or emotions or just, going through it at that moment. I would love to see that happening. And I know, Opal, you're working on something like that already, but I would love to see that happen and come to fruition. Education, awareness. I mean, that's the key. We need to keep on talking about it. We need not to be scared to speak about it. Sometimes we're going to offend certain agencies and people and so forth, but if we keep on hiding behind the 8-ball, for lack of better words, we will not move forward. So I think these conversations, these webinars, these trainings, these movies, these documentaries, they're all key for us to grow and learn ourselves and also collaborate with one another. I see some massive connections here just with the other members that are here. I mean, you three really need to get together. I think you guys will blow it up. But with that said, I just think that schools and school districts need to truly understand the importance of their front line. And to me, their front line is their security. In high schools, when they have their security officers or campus supervisors, whoever they have working the front line, Those are the eyes and the ears. They're hearing things. They're building relationships with certain individuals. I think there's more training that needs to take place there, because that's your front line that will come back and report and then teach staff how to basically funnel their concerns to the right individuals, to the professionals, to the counselors, et cetera, that are in place. So I think we're on the right path. We just need to continue doing this hard work.
Kind of fitting that you talk about training when our fourth and final end statement will be from somebody who's trained over 500,000 people in trafficking aspects. So Opal, just kind of give the audience your opinion in the short term, long term, and yeah, Opal's information in terms of her movie will be in the description below for you, all those watching this in the future.
Okay, I'm going to answer a couple of quick questions here and then I'll close with it. But question about condoms in California. Condoms are not allowed to be used as probable cause. And yes, that is a problem for law enforcement because it makes it much more difficult to get a search warrant in a case like that. Someone mentioned about the fact that we now have technology being given to prisoners in prison. Yes, that makes it even harder for all of us, because I can give you 5 different gangs that are running sex trafficking rings from prison. So even though he's locked up, she's not free. And if you follow Mignon Kids, we have something called Mignon Kids Insider Alerts, where I analyze those cases. They'll be sent out to you, and that'll keep you up to date. But all of those are things that move the goalposts back. So on a proactive side, where we're at is that we have made a movie, especially it's called Sextortion, The Hidden Pandemic. We hope it will be out this fall. You can see the trailer at sextortionfilm.com, sextortionfilm.com, or go to Mignon Kids and we'll link to it. We're asking you to follow Mignon Kids on, it's mignonkids.org, not .com, that's a rock band. So where's this going as far as technology? Well, I've been in it 15 years now, and it's getting infinitely more complicated. When they passed that law, I went to Montana for 10 days. I was so ticked. You know, I cannot believe that we keep moving the goalposts back in order to be able to, all of us trying to protect children. Having said that, I'm excited, which is why I'm here today, because I believe your technology can be very helpful. And I believe it can be helpful for all those people. I recognize many people from across the nation that I've trained with at one point or the other. I think of technology of you empowering the crime analyst. And that's true of hotels, like you were mentioning. That's true of casinos. I do quite a bit of casino training. They're in there, they have top security. I think that it's important, if you're on a webcam sex site, you're public. If you're on a sex ad, you're public. If we can combine all of those and feed those into a crime analyst every morning about here's where all these ads are. And I'll tell you why that's so important. When I train law enforcement, we talk about, is this girl just posted in, let's say, Riverside today and El Monte tomorrow and Los Angeles the next day, okay? She's on a sex circuit, or is she posted simultaneously across 18 different cities throughout California? That is a huge foreign national ring that is advertising the same girl all across the state, and you get a call center. You literally, these are so large, I know 5 of them that are so large, you're calling into a telemarketing center to make your date with this girl, and you don't realize it. And so these are all about money laundering. Your technology can feed that to a crime analyst just like that each morning, so that they have a massive amount of data. The same way with a casino. And by the way, I have 3 jobs at USC, the same thing at USC, because if you're going to allow street prostitution, it'll probably take place on the university campus also, as you're trying to pay for it. Well, I guess you don't have a student loan anymore. It got wiped out yesterday, but I digress. Anyway, I'm kidding. But my point is, this is exciting. This crime is going to get worse. So we empower our kids with education. You mentioned training in schools. I've been doing that for 8 years, and there is a law in California to train all high school kids, but they only get 20 minutes, and it's been absolutely commandeered by, all kinds of groups, and they hardly ever get to human trafficking, which is why I made this movie. So where we need to do it is back up and give them the tools, such as this movie. So one more time on the movie, the good news is NCMEC, National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, it was filmed inside Homeland Security, inside NCMEC, and they are using their national contracts. We have helped fund it so that they can divide it out to 10-minute segments so that the teacher has talking points and they have discussions and they have the ability to download it at home. So that's our first step at trying to counteract all the other craziness that's going on. But I think technology is the key. And I think assembling experts like you have on here, and there are many people in our audience that are smarter than me that should have been up here. So let's all join together and fight together. It's the next generation. I believe how we get this done with this generation will set the stage for all future generations as crime purveyors, criminals, learn to use technology. We've got to stay ahead of them.
Absolutely. Thank you for that, Opal. And just a reminder, all 4 of our expert speakers' information will be in the description as well. So thank you, audience, for joining. This will be a recurring webinar. Like I said, there might be some familiar faces. If any of you in the audience who work in human trafficking and want to be involved in one of our webinars, please visit our website, irex.ai, and you can check us out. And you can also email us at hello@irex.ai. So yes, human trafficking, it seems like right now we're finally shining a light on this epidemic, which is going on around the world. And that's thanks to 4 lights such as Jaime, Mignon, Manolo, and Opal. So thank you guys. And this concludes the webinar for this week. Thank you.